Miami has the Dolphins, the greatest football team. We take the ball from goal to goal like no one's ever seen. We're in the air, we're on the ground, we're always in control. And when you say Miami, you're talking Super Bowl, 'cause we're the Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins #1. Yes, we're the Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins #1.
Time now for Dolphins Central. Here's Ryan Yousefi and Thomas Galicia.
42, down, set, put, can't touch us. Can't touch us.
Welcome, everybody, to Dolphins Central Radio. I am your host, Thomas Galicia, joined, of course, by my co-host, Ryan Yousefi. And we're just going to get right into it as we introduce our first guest of this afternoon. And that is from CBSSports.com's Eye on NFL, Will Brinson. Will, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me.
Well, Will, first things first, a couple months ago you published an article running down the over-under picks for the AFC. And
I did.
In the article, you analyzed the Dolphins over-under, which was at 7.5, which, to me, it does make sense as an over-under. But you said that the verdict would be under. Now, considering the events of the last couple months in New England, does that change in any way, shape, or form?
I don't honestly know that New England, the stuff going on with the Patriots, really affects my opinion of the Dolphins over under. I mean, certainly I had the Patriots are 11.5. I mean, I think that under looks better. I mean, the Patriots aren't going to be as good offensively, as they would be if they had a healthy Rob Gronkowski and a non-incarcerated Aaron Hernandez. That's obvious. But I think people are kind of underestimating what New England's going to do in terms of offense. I mean, Danny Amendola has to stay healthy. I mean, that's a big concern. Rob Gronkowski has to come back and be healthy. Also a big concern. But they got Tom Brady, and they got a very good offensive line. They have Stephen Ridley, who's a very good running back, underrated even, and Shane Vereen, who can line up on the outside, catch passes, can tote the rock. I mean, they can move him around a little bit. He's sort of a running back version of maybe a homeless running back version of Aaron Hernandez without the crime. So, I think they're going to end up being fine offensively. Maybe do the Dolphins beat them in Miami? I mean, maybe. They do that anyway a lot. So, I mean, I don't really think that the Patriots hurts my opinion too much of the Dolphins. They were one where I was kind of, on the line at 7.5, after a good 7-9 season. It was a tough one.
Well, from what you've said, you're in the piece, you're very bearish on the Dolphins simply because of their start. I actually agree with you. I don't think they're going to start off very hot, but I tend to think that their forecast after their bye week is a bit better than yours. As for the post-bye week games, where would you see you say that there are 5 post-bye week wins available. The question is whether there's 6. Which of those 5 do you see being available?
Well, I mean, you start to look after the bye, and you got, obviously you got Buffalo coming out of the bye. That's a bonus at home. Then they go to New England. The Bengals are going to be a very good team after that. So, at Tampa Bay, it's not exactly an easy game. Obviously a lot depends on, how teams, like Tampa Bay is a great example. San Diego's, I think if I was picking the 5, going back and looking, obviously my short-term memory is terrible. I mean, when did I write this? May. So I can barely remember. I think the 4 I was probably looking at, you got Buffalo at Buffalo, Jets at Jets. I mean, I think Miami's the second best team in the division. And then the Chargers at home. Chargers will be traveling a long way across. Certainly the Panthers are a team that they can beat. But I probably have a higher opinion of when I look at the Patriots, the Bucks, the Bengals, and the Panthers and the Steelers. I think those teams are going to be a little bit better than a lot of people are expecting. So that's where I tend to maybe a little more weight on those teams outperforming a team like the Dolphins.
Well, I could see it. I mean, for me, I disagree with you a bit on the Chargers, especially since that's going to be a 1 p.m. Eastern time zone game, and they have to travel out west. And the Dolphins, usually do well in that position when they're facing a team from out west at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. They beat the Seahawks that way last year in a game that I didn't even think they would win.
The sprinkler game.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
The Dolphins games of the last 5 years, which is actually a pretty sad thing to say about the Dolphins, but
right.
But I can also see I could see Cincinnati going either way. I know Cincinnati's going to be a very good team. I have them winning the AFC North, and Tampa's another one that's very very on the fence with. But I think that this team can win 9 or 10 games.
Yeah, look, that's the thing, is it's entirely possible. I think Miami falls in the same category with a team like the Panthers or a team like the Bucks, where you've got there is a significantly high ceiling. A lot has to break right, though. Mike Wallace and Ryan Tannehill have to get on the same page. Shouldn't be that hard. That could easily happen. I like Ryan Tannehill a lot. You've got to get Lamar Miller has to become a feature back with the absence of Reggie Bush. I like Lamar Miller a lot too, but is that going to happen? I don't know. Not a lot of reps to back that up. The offensive line and the secondary, even though I really like Brent Grimes, I think there's a reason that Atlanta didn't pursue him as heavily as they did. You got to wonder about the offensive line and the secondary, and those are two fairly important pieces. If Ryan Tannehill isn't getting the proper protection, then is he going to be able to develop and progress as a quarterback? I think he's a great talent. I think he's going to have a nice year, but you got to be concerned about the line protecting him. And you start to look at a team like the Panthers that can really, with their newly revamped defensive line, should be able to rush the passer. I think there's a pretty big variance level though when you talk about Miami and what their ceiling and what their floor is in terms of wins.
Well, very true. Very true. At least the way I look at it, though, I think they'll approach their ceiling. Now. As for the division as a whole, you said that the Dolphins were the second best team in the AFC East. How would you rank the 4 teams?
Pats, Dolphins are the easy 1-2 for me. I'd probably go Bills, Jets. The Bills have a lot of variance depending on whether Kevin Cobb wins a job or whether they hand it to EJ Manuel, whether Manuel can actually perform. They have a lot of offensive weapons. The EJ, CJ, and TJ are an impressive trio, and that doesn't even count Stevie Johnson. Decent offensive line. They should be able to score some points. I expect a monster year out of CJ Spiller and Doug Marrone's offense. But the question is whether EJ Manuel is the guy, or whether Kevin Cobb can be a bridge for that offense. And if the answer for both of those is no, and it very well could be, then the Bills could stink. Now the Jets, I can't fathom how the Jets are going to be any good on offense. I just can't. They've total erosion at the skill positions. They don't have a ton of talent on offense. If Geno Smith is forced to play, I think that's a bad thing. Mark Sanchez is Mark Sanchez at this point. I think he needs a fresh start. They don't have wide receivers. They don't have, their offensive line is deteriorated over the last few years. They don't have a really good running game. The type of running game they need to run what Rex Ryan wants to run. Now their defense, I think, will improve. I think moving Quentin Coples to outside line is going to generate a lot of pass rush. I think you got Muhammad Wilkerson and Sheldon Richardson on the interior now. They've got a nice foundation on the inside line. They lost Revis, but Antonio Cromartie was really good last year. He could step in as the number 1 cornerback, and D. Milliner, if he's healthy, can certainly play. So the defense, simply because it has Rex Ryan too, coaching it is going to be significantly, it's going to be good. They're going to be able to stop teams, but I just worry too much about those offenses. So I'd probably go Bills 3 and then Jets 4 in the AFC East.
That seems to be what I hear everywhere. So it does make it feel a little bit better that. Well, actually, no. I don't know how I feel to know that everyone seems to be ranking the Bills below the Dolphins, because here's the pessimistic side of me. I think the Bills have a lot of sleeper team potential.
Yeah, but I thought that too last year, and then they burnt me. So I'm not gonna fall down that rabbit hole again. And I think it boils down to everybody. People know this in the NFL. It boils down to the quarterback. And if you have a quarterback, you're going to be significantly better than if you don't have a quarterback. And I know that the Dolphins have. Obviously everybody technically has a quarterback. But I know that the Dolphins have a talented quarterback. I don't know whether or not the Bills have a talented quarterback, and that's my concern. I think, yeah, look, with C.J. Spiller and the talent they have on offense, just with C.J. Spiller, the Bills are capable of winning a lot of games and going to the playoffs. I mean, they've got enough talent on defense. They got, should have a pretty good defensive line, but they're supposed to have a good one last year. Steve Gilmore, underrated kid out of South Carolina, playing quarterback for them. He's a stud. The Bills have everybody in the NFL has variance, but the Bills have so much hinging on that quarterback position that it concerns me. Whereas I know that Ryan Tannehill can step up and be a productive quarterback in the NFL, so that gives me a little bit more confidence in the Dolphins.
That actually makes a lot of sense, because looking at those two teams, really the only position where I see the Dolphins ahead of the Bills is at quarterback. I see a lot of talent on the Bills to a point where they're a little bit scary. I don't even expect the Dolphins to sweep them this year. Actually, I expect them to make up that win in a very unexpected way at some point against a team that no one's going to expect them to beat. And they do this all the year, by the way, or every year, by the way. They always seem to lose to a bad team either before or after beating a team that you would think they have no business beating. Actually, last year, that's what happened with the Seattle game and the Buffalo game.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the thing. That's what I'm saying. Like, so maybe they win. Maybe they beat the Patriots in Miami. They've been doing that for years. I mean, they can upset the Patriots in Miami, but then you go to Buffalo and you lose to Buffalo, in December, or you lose coming out of the bye when C.J. Spiller goes wild down in Miami, and so. There again, I'm saying, if let's say they beat the Patriots, but then you lose to the Jets or the Bills, or you go 2-2 against those teams. All of a sudden, if they don't win at least 3 games against the Bills and the Jets, I think they're in trouble. I love my under if that happens.
I think they will. I think if anything, Buffalo wins that December 23rd game if they do.
Right.
At least it wouldn't surprise me if they did. As for other edges in talent, where do you see the Dolphins as having an edge over anyone in terms of talent at any position?
Well, I mean, if we're just talking, if we're talking just the AFC East, I mean, I think you certainly got to go wide receiver. I don't love the Mike Wallace. I didn't like the Mike Wallace sign. I mean, I like the Mike Wallace signing in the fact that Mike Wallace is very good. I'm not a huge fan of it, and I thought they overpaid and probably could have gotten him a little cheaper, but that's neither here nor there. He signed. I think, unless I'm missing somebody, he's the best receiver in the division by far. I mean, I would put him above Stevie Johnson. I would put him above Danny Amendola. I'd certainly put him above, Jeremy Curley, whoever the Jets' top wide receiver is. No offense to Santonio Holmes and Stephen Hill. So, excuse me, you got Mike Wallace. You got Brandon Gibson got added, and you got Brian Hartline. I mean, the Dolphins have the best receiving core in the division. That's a big deal for a developing quarterback like Ryan Tannehill. Obviously, I would plug them at number 2 in the division in terms of quarterback. You probably got an argument that they, even though you have a Buffalo team that has Mario Williams, I would probably take, and I know that Deion Jordan is certainly unproven, but I would probably take Cameron Wake and Deion Jordan over, Mario Williams and Mark Anderson if I'm picking. I think I'd almost certainly do that, even without, seeing them moving around in terms of the defense. Jets, Copels, a little unproven at the outside line. So yeah, maybe the Dolphins have the best pass rush in the division. That's a pretty big thing. I don't think they have the best offensive line. I really do worry about Jonathan Martin at left tackle. And then it's one thing if you're plugging him in at right tackle, and you're sitting on Jake Long on the left side. I think it's a whole different ball game having Martin move to the left side. That's a major concern for me. Linebackers are nice. They went out and rebooted the entire linebacker core, Ellerby and Wheeler, and those are two good additions. But I wouldn't, I don't know. I don't think the secondary ranks is, it's probably the 3rd best secondary in the. No offense to those guys, but it's probably the 3rd best secondary in the division. If I'm talking, number 1 corners, and I'm putting Gilmore and Crow over Grimes, who, as I said, I like him, but I just don't think that. I think there's a little bit of a red flag there. So the Dolphins have talent. I worry about the offensive line and the secondary.
I worry a little bit more about the offensive line than I do the secondary because Grimes is a good fit for the Dolphins system. Jamar Taylor, good fit for the system as a young guy, and Richard Marshall, when he comes back, another good fit for the system itself. As for the offensive line, the only thing that really concerns me is Jonathan Martin on the left side. But at the same time, I do know that was his natural position in college. And last year he had to learn how to play right tackle. Then Jake Long got hurt, and he got switched back to left tackle. And he did at times look a little bit lost out there. And I don't think he's going to look as lost out there this season. So
no, he shouldn't look as lost, and he definitely looked lost. And yeah, look, I mean, Martin's a high draft pick. They got a lot invested in him. They have every right to think that he could be the future at left tackle. I just didn't think he showed it last year. If I'm wrong and he turns out to be a stud left tackle, then yeah, all of a sudden the Dolphins' offense is certainly going to shape up. I have concerns about it, especially with the ability, the creative ability of some of the defensive minds in the AFC East.
Yeah. Also, what I do think helps mine a little bit is being lined up next to a veteran like Richie Incognito, as opposed to last year. He was lined up next to John Jerry, who Jerry can pass, protect well, but he's never been a good run blocker. Whereas Incognito can do both of them. So I feel a little bit better about Martin with him next to Incognito, but he is a question mark.
Yeah, I mean, look, it all boils down. If you're optimistic about him, it totally changes the way that the way that you're looking at what that offensive line can do. But if you're pessimistic, I mean, you're either going to be optimistic or pessimistic about it. So for me, I'm not as optimistic, and that's why I'm a little down, bearish or bullish? I'm a little down on the Dolphins coming into this season with that 7.5 win total.
Hey, well, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Yeah. When it comes to the over/under, I think to back up your argument, I'm a little worried as a Dolphins fan about how they're going to gel because they're throwing a lot of new pieces together. How do you see the defense getting together? How quickly can that happen? Because, they've pretty much revamped their entire cornerback crew. And, everybody knows about the linebackers. And, they have a rookie that's going to supposedly play a big part. That's a lot of pieces moving around and getting together. Training camp, I think they have 5 preseason games this year. But do you think that affects, because, with their schedule, the over-under has a lot to do with the schedule as well, not just what you think about a team, of course. So do you believe that's going to play a part in that first stretch? Everybody knows the first couple games is tough, and they're also going to be getting to know each other, and it isn't just about practice. So do you think that's going to play a big part in the slow start, which in turn could affect that overall win total?
Yeah, absolutely. The Browns and the Colts aren't exactly murderer's row in the NFL, but you're going on the road the first 2 games for 2 teams. These are the 3 teams in the NFL, the Browns, the Dolphins, and the Colts, that really went out and got crazy in free agency, I thought, and they're
right.
Quote unquote off-season champs. So if the Browns are improved and the Dolphins can't go out there and win week 1 and they can't go to Indy and win week 2, all of a sudden, you don't want to be staring 0-2 with Falcons, Saints, Ravens on deck. Now, maybe they win the first 2 games and then all of a sudden they have the upshot of heading 3-2 into the bye. I think there's a lot in terms of projecting how many wins they're going to end up with. Folds on those or hinges on those first 2 games, and I think it's going to be. I think it's an issue. You're transitioning defenses. You've got a lot of new pieces coming in. You've got to wonder about the health and the explosion of Brent Grimes. Is Deion Jordan? They invested a lot in him, moving up to get him. Is he ready to step in and contribute from day one and rush the passer? Are those linebacker additions going to fit from day one? Or is the secondary going to be prepared to face 2 teams that are going to be good on offense? And I think the Browns are going to get vertical and be much better on offense. When you look at Rob Chudzinski coming in, he fits Obviously, they get him without Josh Gordon. That's a big win, but he fits what Brandon Weeden does well. And the Colts with Pep Hamilton and a new offensive coordinator. I mean, you got two teams that are also changing what they do. But Pep Hamilton, Norv Turner can call plays. I think it's going to be a tough first couple tests for the Dolphins. And if it doesn't pan out well, then you've got a major concern because Falcons, Saints, Ravens, all three of those teams can score and throw the ball deep. So that's why I worry about that secondary. I think you have 5 teams coming off the bat that can challenge the Dolphins deep and can potentially score some runs. Now, again, if they win 3 games heading into the bye, I would if I was projecting, I would change my outlook on my my over under. I think.
Right. Yeah, I think as the Dolphins fan base, they're cautiously optimistic, but when it comes to the overall picture, I think you have a lot of Miami Heat fans down here that are used to the confetti at the end of the year. And I think right now the most important thing for the franchise is just they've been taking 1 step forward, 2 steps back when it comes to, a 5-year window. And, Henny looks good one season, or Pennington gets him into the playoffs, and the next couple of years are just terrible. And you got to break it all up. I think more than the wins and losses, it might be get that wild card, whatever you got to do, whether it be 9 or 10 wins, if you got to do that, and just have something to look forward to next year because you do have a lot of people locked up. They could be said for a lot of teams, but I think people underestimate the Colts and a lot of teams on their schedule. They have a tendency to split with these teams like the Bills and the Jets because that's just the way it goes in your division, So I hate playing the win-loss game, but how do you feel that the overall team, you think Philbin's taking them in the right direction? I personally was impressed with him last season, and I think he's helped Ireland a lot when it comes to picking the right players to fit a system. How do you feel about Philbin?
Yeah, I think Philbin's a great coach. He's an understated guy, very calm, very pragmatic. I think he's a really smart football coach who quiet guy, goes about his business in the right way, and he wants good guys in there. And I like Jeff Philbin a lot. I worry, you look at Jeff Ireland, is he shoving all his chips into the center of the table? He did that this offseason, traded up to get a pick. And I worry that, when you do that, the best teams in the NFL are the teams that are run by the people with the best job security. And then
he doesn't have that.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it certainly helps when you have good job security because you can take risk. But when you don't, and you have to shove, put everything in the center, it makes it a lot riskier. And I think there's probably a sense. I mean, if we sense that, then I think the Dolphins sense that too. And if you start to wonder how things will unfold if it doesn't go well. Again, a lot of variance. They could win 10 games. I mean, look, the Colts won 11 games last year, and that was after a 2-win season. They could win 10 games this year and get in the playoffs easily. They look like they might be a playoff team last year, but they do, I think have a schedule that doesn't match up well for a team in transition.
Right. I mean, Ireland's this is his last year under contract, and I think he won't be trading any starters for second-round picks this season. So, it's definitely this year or bust. They've flown planes here asking for him to be fired. They've done just about everything you can do to just, to express displeasure with him. And, a lot of fans were surprised this offseason about the moves, moving up to the draft, doing things very un-Dolphin-like in the past. But, like you said, I don't think I was surprised the salary cap works so good for them in the future, that they didn't mortgage the future. I thought that he might do that, but I think you're right when it comes to the better teams look to the future. They don't, they set themselves up like the Patriots and their draft picks. They're always, no matter how good they are, they're always looking to the future. So I agree with you there.
I mean, without question.
Yeah. Thomas, you got something for him?
No, I was actually going to add to your point. Something else I'd like to point out is that when they traded up for Jordan, they didn't mortgage any of their future draft picks. They just all they did was they traded a second rounder that they had lying around this year from the Bucs they gave us trade. So you're absolutely right. Ireland did do a good job of that. Other than that, really, I have nothing else to add. Ryan, do you have another question?
No, thanks a lot, Will, for joining us today. Some real good insight on the Dolphin stuff. It's good to hear someone's opinion that isn't going to just tell us, what we want to hear. I like to hear both sides of it. So that was real good.
Man, no problem, guys. Well, hey, look, it's been fun. Thanks for having me, and talk soon.
Yeah, you're a great follow on Twitter too. Did you post that Larry Brown pick the other day?
Yeah, I think it was actually with the Denver Nuggets at the ABA though. It wasn't a Carolina pick.
That was shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah. But all right, thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, take it easy, guys.
Football fans, looking to get healthy this year? Now is the time, and I have the perfect place for you. Save 10% at onit.com/football radio. Exclusive PFC radio listeners save 10% off their order. That's onit.com, ONNIT.com/football radio.
Hey, we have Joseph Buccellato. How you doing today, Joe?
Good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Great. We're going to talk some fantasy football here. You focus on the offensive side of the ball, of course, and how do you feel about the Dolphins' outlook this season on the offensive side of the ball? Do you feel Tannehill is going to have a season where you could take him as a number one quarterback, or later in the draft possibly?
Well, a lot of it has to do with the size league. If you're looking at a 16-team league, then yeah, I think he's definitely capable, because if you don't have a quarterback in a deep league, you might as well pack it in. You're dead. So in deep league or in a two-quarterback starting league, yeah, he's definitely a guy that you should target because he's capable. In terms of a 12-team league, or even some people play 10s, he's probably better left for your bench for now.
Okay. How do you see the running back situation stacking up on fantasy-wise? Lamar Miller, of course, his first season where he's going to get the lion's share of the carries. Is he someone that you can target higher the draft because he's going to get more carries and there's a lot of committees these days? Or how are you feeling about him? Is he someone that you are comfortable taking as one of your higher picks?
I've done a lot of research, gone over the internet looking for what the experts are saying about Lamar Miller. And everywhere I turn, everyone's got the same analysis, is that he might lack in the bulldozing power. He's not a pile pusher, but he can. He's explosive. He hits the hole hard. He's not a big guy, but neither is a guy like Darren Sproles. And I happen to play in leagues that reward that favor touchdowns instead of the yardage. So guys like that are guys that you want on your team that are explosive and can break any play. So, looking at the ADP and about all the rankings, they got Lamar listed at the rank 21st. I actually have him a little bit lower, down towards 30, because there's a lot of other backs I prefer. And you never know what can happen inside the 5-yard line. They may not have given up on Daniel Thomas yet. So it's a dicey situation in terms of, is he going to be a 3-down back?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with what kind of league you're in, because a lot of leagues, they reward 50-plus yard touchdowns, or something you might be better in than most. But I was looking back at his stats last week from college and at University of Miami. He's not much of a pass catcher, although he might, maybe he'll show that more in this offense. But the PPR leagues, if it's something like that, he might go even lower. So, it is. Go ahead.
Yeah, and on top of what you're saying is that one of his weaknesses that everyone seems to identify is his pass blocking ability. And if you can't pass block, you're not going to be on the field on third down. So if what you're saying is he's not much of a pass catcher and he can't pass block, it might be difficult for him to get on the field in third downs, especially when you got the other guy, I have a hard time pronouncing his last name, Gillespie, who they drafted, who everyone seems to think that maybe he can be a factor.
Right, and I think people possibly that don't watch as many Dolphin games in fantasy world might think they're giving up more on Daniel Thomas than they are, because they will bring him in at the 3 and 5 yard line just because that's what he can do. He'll have the the 2 carry games with the touchdown, and he'll vulture that. And also Keller might steal some more of those red zone opportunities, along with having more options this year, like Gibson in the slot. So it's gonna be a risky proposition taking him high, if you ask me, but it's intriguing because I've been watching. He's training with Frank Gore a lot in the off season, and I can see a lot of that in him. Although he's not as bruising, of course, but yeah, I mean, I think the Dolphins have some fantasy upside this year for once. As a Dolphins fan, I pretty much have a rule that I wasn't taking any Dolphins, but this year they actually have some people that you can throw in there.
At least they have a pulse this year. They got Wallace in there, and being from the New York metro area, I know Keller is a good player. Last year, he was a mess. The whole Jets team was a mess, and the Jets are going to be a disaster this year. But he's a good player. He's a good pass catcher. He's a nice safety blanket. He's a reliable weapon. So, I mean, fantasy-wise, there's a lot of other tight ends you want above him. But in terms of real life, he's going to open some things up for the other guys around him. And it could be one of those backs, whether it's Thomas on the goal line. Someone's got to cover Keller. So maybe a little extra room for those guys to get in on those 1-yard plunges. Going back to what you said about Lamar Miller, with the Dolphins' options on offense, the scheme that they're running, that's one of the positives that people are saying about Lamar Miller, is that he doesn't have to be a bruising running back to generate yardage and to generate big plays, because it's more of a read-type scheme that they're looking at. So it's not like he's going to have to be a pile pusher, and that's going to be in his favor if you're looking at it from a fantasy perspective, that he doesn't need to be a bulldog to be a valuable asset on your team.
Right. I think Keller, I think he's the kind of guy that you might want to take your second tight end, the bye week tight end, and plug in there in the desperation injury moments, and he's just the kind of guy that you're going to have to rely on that touchdown to save your day, from him. But I agree with you. I think Sanchez at some points, just as on the outside as a Dolphin fan watching the game flipping back, seemed like when he was the most frantic, when he nothing was going right, it seemed like he would go after him 5 plays in a row. And I think with all the weapons the Dolphins do have, I think he could surprise a lot of people. He's not going to break out and lead your team in points, but I agree with you. I think he's somebody that you can plug in there sometimes in emergency, so that's good.
Like you said, if he's on my team, I think he's a great asset. If my tight end is someone who might be injury prone, like a Gronkowski, he's a great backup on a team that owns Gronkowski, because I feel you can put him in and he can be a starter. He's a type of plug and play player where you put him in week 1 and you just hope for the best. Because I'm a defensive guy too, so it's sort of like with a defensive lineman, where you just put him in, and at the end of the season, you hope he ranks in the top 12. I feel that's sort of like a Keller, where if you start getting cute with the tight end matchups, Murphy's Law, you're always going to pick the wrong one. With a guy like Keller, just have him on your team, and if you're forced to start him, I think he's still better than a lot of options out there.
You could do worse, is what we're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Thomas, you got something for him?
Oh, yes, I do, actually. This is going back to Lamar Miller. Now, of course, the Dolphins are considered the front runner in the Vontae Lee sweepstakes. They have been for a month, and I've reached the point with that where, just waking up when something happens, because it's all been a bunch of talk. But assuming the Dolphins do sign Vontae Leach as their fullback, what kind of effect would you see that having on Lamar Miller, since it will take some of the pass blocking pressure off of him?
Well, with Vontae in particular, one of the things that I found was that the type of formation the Dolphins like to run is part of the reason why they are so aggressive to get. I mean, it's hard for me to say how aggressive they are because I'm not on the inside. I'm reading what everyone else is reading. But from what I hear, the Dolphins are being aggressive in trying to get Vontae Leach. And part of that is the formation that the Dolphins like running. I think it was like an I formation where if you get a fullback in there who can open up lanes, I mean, again, Leach is a guy who blocked for Arian Foster. He's a guy who blocked for Ray Rice. That's going to help Lamar Miller. So any big body in front of Lamar is going to help. In terms of pass blocking, it's yet to be seen how much that's going to help, because if you got Wallace and Hartline on the outsides, if you got Keller, and then you need to bring in the third wide receiver, if you're spreading these guys out, that's going to mean someone's off the field. So either Lamar's going to be off the field or Vontae's going to be off the field, so they're not really going to be helping each other. But in terms of just your general I formation, yeah, it's going to be a tremendous help for Lamar Miller or whoever else is going to be the back.
Oh, very good. Also, could you see either Brandon Gibson or Brian Hartline being a fantasy sleeper with Mike Wallace getting the majority of the double teams with the Dolphins this year?
I have Hartline much higher than the experts. When I ran the experts today, it was an average of 62 experts, and he was clocking in at the 48th ranked wide receiver. I got him at 36 because every time I look at the box score, the guy puts up stats. And now you have Keller. Now you have Wallace. Hartline's a good receiver. All these other weapons are only going to help him because he was sort of on an island last year besides, him and Reggie Bush. So I think that's going to be a good thing. So, like I said, I got him 12 slots higher than everyone else. So if you're looking at starting three wide receivers, yeah, that's your wide receiver 3.
Yeah, well, I think when it comes to Hartline, I'm not sure if they have stats for this, but when it comes to targets, it seems like he capitalizes on his targets better than most. He has great hands, and it just seems like when the ball is even in his area, he comes down with it more often. That's why you'll get at the very worst, he'll have the 70-yard game and 6 catches sometimes, While other receivers might need more space, he has the greatest hands I've seen on the Dolphins in a while. And I think he's a solid player. If like we were saying with Keller, he might not be someone who's going to carry your team, but you could do a lot worse. And if you're in a league with 3 wide receivers starting, that's even he'd probably move even more up the ranks of the average draft position.
I'll take him in every one of my leagues as a starter as long as he's my wide receiver number 3. If he's anything higher than that, then you're pushing it. But for me, he's more than just roster depth. I like to kind of fill my roster with a lot of veterans who I know what I'm getting into. With Hartline, I think he's more than that. He's someone that I can count on to contribute on a weekly basis.
Right, he's someone that I can. I look at the Steelers when they had Wallace, and Brown over there is Antonio Brown. I can see him filling that role somewhat. Not as explosive, I guess you could say, but someone that Wallace is going down the field and Hartline's going to take the under and break it a little bit. Maybe not for the touchdown, but he's going to have a lot more area to work in this season, and he's getting cockier and cockier. The last season was a breakout, and I think it could go a bunch of ways, but I think this season he could be definitely someone. I like where you have him ranked. I can't see there being 47 receivers higher than him. He said he was like 48. I think I would take him higher than that. I'll agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, last year he was the 20. I'm looking at stats, fantasy stats rankings. Last year he was 27th overall, the 27th wide receiver. So it's just surprising for me that he's the 48th ranked wide receiver when he put up the 27th best wide receiver stats last year, and he's young, and he's got more weapons, and he's playing in a quarterback who's a year older and wiser. It's these are things that fantasy owners should pick up on. I think one of the things two things that hurt him. One is he's not a sexy name, and 2 is that a lot of fantasy owners in the summer get enamored with potential. And, I'd rather roll the dice on a guy who has a reported huge upside and a high ceiling as opposed to taking someone safe like Hartline. Yeah. I'm the type of owner that I want safe, productive stats.
And Bolden.
As opposed to rolling the dice with the unknown.
Right.
So, when you're talking about a Tavon Austin, that's a different story because, he's a first-round pick. Clearly owners are going to gravitate more towards a Tavon Austin type. But if you start getting down to, like, Cordell Patterson or Wright or Hunter, I'll take Hartline over any of those guys.
Right. Especially rookies, right?
I could totally agree with that. Yeah, it's definitely the Anquan Bolden. And now another question is the Dolphins' offensive line has had its issues this offseason in terms of who's going to play where and whatnot. Now, from what you've seen on the offensive line, how do you see that affecting the Dolphins players, the Dolphins position players, in terms of fantasy points?
It's hard to say. I know Jake Long's no longer there, but then that might be a blessing. It's hard to say when you're talking about the zone type of scheme and the reading schemes because it's not necessarily your prototypical smash offensive lineman. It's more guys who can move and guys who are mobile. In terms of fantasy, I don't think that's something fantasy owners should be scared about is that, well, they lost Jake Long, who was I think, first-round pick. They lost Long, and, it doesn't matter how much Tannehill improves if his offensive line can't keep him upright, he's doomed. That may lead to a 5-11 record, which might be the case for Dolphin fans, and you get sad about that. But in terms of fantasy, Aaron Rodgers gets his head knocked off all the time. Jay Cutler gets clobbered all the time. They put pretty good stats themselves.
Good point.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Joseph. And to plug your site at the beginning of the interview here, it's fantasyleaguegm.com, and you can go there for a lot of your interesting information here. I think Twitter's changed how we prepare for our drafts. No one has to buy that magazine 3 months in advance anymore, and then when injuries and things happen, be outdated. They just follow guys like you on Twitter. I found that very helpful last season.
Yeah, I appreciate it. When I was building the site, myself and my partner, Mike Caprio, it's what we were thinking was that what's the best way to give people the information they need at one location so that they didn't have to bookmark everything, they didn't have to bounce from page to page. Fantasy League GM basically tells you where the information is and here's how to go find it quickly. So it's fast, and like you said, with Twitter, it's all synced in so that the news comes out on someone's site, and then we'll show it to you, and we'll say, here's a good article, go read it, and, go learn.
Right, and so Twitter is at Joe Bozoso. All right?
Yeah.
You want to spell for the guys?
It's, JOBOOZOSO. It's basically my name, Joe Boo, and Jimmy Page. So put together. FantasyLeagueGM.com. I really appreciate your time, guys. Anytime you want to have me, I'd be more than welcome to get on again.
Cigar fans, check out FifthDownCigar.com and enter the coupon code PFC to get 10% off your order. Lots of nice, high-end cigars. That's FifthDownCigar.com. Enter the code PFC for 10% off your order.
Our thanks to our guest, Will Brinson from CBSSports.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Will Brinson. Also, thank you to FantasyGM.com's Joe Buccellato. Hold on, you can follow him on Twitter at Joe Buzoso. So, Ryan, earlier today on Twitter, you created a new hashtag that seemed to take South Florida by storm. Can you explain?
I did. Yes, the Shameful Admission Wednesday. It started off with I had seen someone mention the Nick Cannon interview on Highly Questionable, and so I went on YouTube. You know, they said it was real good, and I checked it out. And they mentioned that Wild 'N Out was coming back, and they mentioned the show, and I was like, is that still on? And then I found out, I guess it's coming back after 6 seasons, 6 years away. So, and I felt the need to just come clean and let everyone know that I had once gone to a taping of Wild 'N Out, and all because of a girl, of course. And so I did that, and I created a hashtag, and it's, you know, as it does on Twitter, it just flew. Everybody started, you know, revealing their shameful admissions. So you said you had one you're going to reveal on the show, and I know everyone's excited to hear it. So let's go. Let's put all the cards on the table, Thomas.
Okay. I once dated a Jets fan.
You once dated a Jets fan. That's terrible.
And I'm not proud of it. I knew I shouldn't have done it. You know, I'm all worried about stuff like that. But
it's like a Yankees fan dating a Red Sox fan, man. It happens. But you know, there's factors to go into that. So I can't blame you for that. That's not fair. I thought you said you once were a Jets fan, and I was about to hang up. I was about to end the show right there. I don't even know you anymore. No.
Yeah,
but
I was 20 years old, and, you know, she was cute. It worked, but then it didn't work. I'm not a Jets fan now,
right.
So. But that's my shameful admission. And, you know, to add to that, another shameful admission, I actually fell asleep thinking that the Dolphins had won that Monday Night Football game back in 2000.
I was just going to mention that. I think a lot of us have shameful admissions for that game. I made my girlfriend go home. I said, I think she's going to stay over that night, and I asked her, I was like, you don't want to see me like this. You know, after the Elliott catch there in the end zone, I had just seen enough. I didn't need to see any more. And I think that was the beginning of the end of that relationship. So I think a lot of Dolphins fans...
Oh, no, this is going to get some boost. Honestly, I think it is because of that Jets game and, you know, like the reaction of, I think, every Dolphins fan had to Jimbo Elliott that some of those Season fans wound up leaving early during Game 6. Again, I wouldn't have, but I think that, you know, maybe the psyche of the Dolphins and everything that they put us through, they kind of conditioned us to always expect the worst, to the point where we were even expecting the worst from the
Right.
Not defending it, but I think that could be I think that could have been a you know, one factor. But I'll tell you what was not a factor, but instead would be a great factor in terms of you know working out or you know or anything like that. You know, as they call it on the website, total human optimization, and that is onit.com. Who is a great sponsor to not only our show, but also the entire Pro Football Central Radio network. Onit.com offers for listeners of Pro Football Central Radio, and we're talking all the shows, not just Dolphins Central Radio, but whatever show you may listen to, a 10% discount off of vitamins and supplements. All you have to do is go to onit.com/footballradio, and you will get a 10% discount. And these are good products. They actually do have the endorsement of Green Bay Packers linebacker A.J. Hawk. Also, Joe Rogan also endorses the product, and these are very good products. So you know, be sure to check out onit.com/footballradio, and you will get a 10% discount on your total human optimization needs. Once again, thank you to our guest, Will Brinson from CBSSports.com's Eye on Football. You can follow him at Will Brinson. Also, you can follow him at Eye on Football. Also, thanks to our guest, Joseph Buccellato from FantasyGM.com. You can follow him on Twitter at JoeBoozoso. That's at JoBoozoso. Be on the lookout next week for my exclusive Bleacher Report Dolphins training camp primer. It's a big one. I've been working on it all week. That should debut on either Monday or Tuesday. I'm not sure. Also, be sure to follow the show on Twitter at Dolphins Central. If you have any questions for myself or for Ryan, just send them over to us on our Twitter page, which for me is at Thomas Felicia, and for Ryan is at Riz Wright. Also, be sure to join us again next week. Same Fin time, same Fin Podcast Network. Ryan, would you like to say goodbye?
Hey, guys, thanks for listening. See you next week.
This has been a presentation of the Pro Football Central Network. For news, blogs, highlights, and more, log on to ProFootballCentral.com.